We are here to talk today about one of the most confusing yet compelling topics as it pertains to real estate, especially for first-time home buyers. And that's whether or not it truly is cheaper to own than it is to rent. You know, people, I'm sure, have heard these very powerful statements of like, quit paying your landlord's mortgage, or it's cheaper to own than to rent, or man, that rent check you're writing every single month, you're just lighting it on fire. And people make these powerful statements. Sometimes people that really, really love us a lot make these powerful statements. But ask yourself, how many people have ever broken down the analysis that goes into big statements like that? And I think it's sort of unfair to make statements like that without providing the data to support it. And for those of you guys who know me, this is Dave Medina. I run the Elevate Group, been in real estate services for 21 years, and education and empowerment is without question our number one core value. So it's all about putting the buyer into the driver's seat so they understand exactly where their capabilities lie. So today we are going to unpack that big question out there and look at it from a step-by-step financial analysis and answer that question of, is it cheaper to own than to rent? So let's look at the next slide. All right, so here's the case study that we're going to look at here today. So we're looking at a family of four, right? Husband and wife and two kids currently living in Menifee, California. Shout out to my Menifee people out there. So this couple represents a solid job history. Their income expectations are healthy and their credit profiles look good. They've got access to about $25,000 between their savings and a little bit of gift money from mom and dad. And they've also been growing 401ks for the past few years, and that they're starting to see some progress with their retirement accounts growing as well. They've lived and rented in Menifee for the last 3 years. Kids are totally ingrained in the community. So now what they are faced with the decision of doing is to either renew their lease or potentially move on to a bigger home and rent and sign a lease to do so, or is now the time to take the plunge and jump into homeownership? So let's look at the next slide. All right, so we're going to look at a 5-year analysis of renting versus owning. And the reason why I picked 5 years is that it's enough time to be able to look into the future and reasonably know where you're going to be, right? I think especially people that are well rooted into a community and have kids that are young in the school systems and they want to keep them there. You know, 5 years goes by like that. I'll tell you, it certainly does for us. But also I didn't want to go too much further than that because we all know that life takes pivots, jobs change, people relocate. And so I didn't want to go too far out in the future to make sense of this. But also anything too short, I don't think you can really get a good financial understanding of. So 5 years is sort of that target. And the profile of renting is somebody, that same four-person household that is renting a single-family residence for $3,200 a month. Now, in addition to that, I'm including $53 to account for their rental insurance. This is how they protect their personal goods against theft and fire. In fact, most landlords recommend that their renters have rental insurance now, but if you don't have it, you should definitely consider it. Now, I'm also going to take into consideration over the next 5 years, a 5% annual rent increase, right? So in certain areas of Southern California, landlords are allowed to raise rents up to 10%, if you can believe that. So over the past few years, it's actually been higher than 5%. It's forecasted to come down a little bit now. So what I tried to do is take kind of an average and take a conservative line right down the middle. So 5% is what we're looking at here today. Now, comparatively, we're going to look at purchasing a home today, and the profile of home that we're looking at is a purchase price of $550,000. Now, this buyer profile is going to purchase this house using a 3% down conventional loan that's available only to first-time home buyers, which would be a down payment of about $16,500, leaving a loan amount of $533,500. We're looking at an interest rate on this loan of 6.75% and an APR of 7.276. Now, in addition to the down payment that a buyer needs to spend in order to get into a home, there are also closing costs that they're expected to incur. So I'm estimating closing costs of about $11,000 here. Now, right away, I just want to stop right there and time out because people are looking at that $16,500 and then $11,000 for closing costs and saying, wait a minute, Dave, that's almost $28,000. Like, we're paying $3,200 for rent, man. Like, how, there's no way we're gonna be able to come up with that kind of money. We don't have access to a gift. We don't want to take from our retirement. So if you were to line up 100 first-time home buyers and go down the line, interviewing them one by one, and you ask them the question, what is the biggest hurdle that you face today going from currently renting and jumping into home ownership? You'd be surprised. It's not going to be credit or income. Because I think people intuitively know that you have to have a somewhat healthy credit profile in order to buy a home. And they intuitively feel when they start making enough money, like, hey, maybe I'm throwing this money away by putting into rent, and maybe it's time to look at this from an investment standpoint. The number one common denominator that represents a hurdle for first-time home buyers is cash or lack thereof, right? For precisely those same reasons. It's expensive to rent. It's hard to save $28,000. You might as well be telling some first-time home buyers, go save $280,000. In their mind, it's the same thing. So if you're one of those people out there that doesn't have a savings, that doesn't have access to this money that's needed in order to get into a home, do not let that dissuade you. We have lots of options that work to minimize that hurdle by providing resources that will cover all of the required down payment, in fact, to purchase a home, and even some closing cost credit. When we combine that potentially with structuring the offer where the seller might consider paying some of your closing costs with you, I cannot tell you how many times I've had success putting people into a home with less money out of pocket than it would cost them to pay first month's rent and security deposit on that house that this couple is considering renting. So don't let that dissuade you, but for the purposes of this example, we're looking at a 3% down conventional loan based on the criteria that you see here before you, okay? And also just to throw in, property taxes can differ widely from one home to another. So we are using a 1.25% tax rate for the sake of this illustration. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so this slide is typically where where renters sort of hit the brakes and stop and make their decision to not pursue homeownership and stay within renting, because this is a little bit of daunting information here. Let's start with that middle column where it's looking at your rent on year one. So this is factoring in the $3,200 that you're going to pay for the next 12 months by renting this home. And it's also including $53 of renter's insurance for a grand total of $3,253. Now, fast forward all the way to year 5. If we included that 5% rent increase year over year, you would be paying at that time $3,890 to rent that same place. Now, insurance goes up just like everything else does, so we increase from $53 to $64. So when you hit that 5-year period as a renter, you're going to be paying $3,954 in this analysis. Over the course of that entire 5-year period, you will have parted ways with $215,364. I'm going to pause for a minute so you can sit on that number. $215,000 of outgoing money to rent this home for 5 years. That is staggering, you guys. That's got to have bells and radars going off in your head as maybe not the best, most wise financial decision to make. However, this is where that argument sort of breaks down. Let's take a look at buying a home today. So based on the parameters of that loan that I set forth on the previous slide, you would be looking at principal and interest payment of $3,460. Now, with property taxes, PMI or private mortgage insurance, as well as homeowners insurance or fire insurance for that home, you'd be looking at approximately a little over $1,100 a month, making the grand total of that monthly payment $4,570. When you're comparing it against that $3,200, it represents a pretty significant delta. And that right there is where a lot of people slam on the brakes and say, not going to do it. We're going to rent instead because it's cheaper, right? Now, interestingly enough, however, when you compare that rent, that monthly mortgage payment against what the rent will be in 5 years, not so big of a delta anymore, right? Notice that the mortgage payment is not going up, whereas the rent is going up every single year. So that's definitely something to consider, okay? Now, the cash flow difference, however, because this is important that you know that, you would be spending out of pocket in this example a little more than $60,000 more out of pocket right? So now instead of $215,000, it's over $275,000. So it's going to cost you more out of pocket, a little more than $60,000 over the course of this 5 years. So clearly renting is cheaper, or is it? Let's look at the next slide. So here's what you may not know. Over the next 5 years, that home will likely appreciate in value. So the 5-year forecast of appreciation in Riverside County is 4.89%. Now you need to know that this is not a linear line, right? There are years where we appreciate far greater than 4.89%, and there are years, not really of recent, where we have appreciated less than that. So this is sort of taking a healthy yet conservative analysis of expectations of over the next 5 years. You should average out at about 4.89% year over year appreciation. So that means at the end of that 5-year period of home ownership, that $550,000 house that you bought will now be worth $698,000, $698,377. That's a mouthful, right? And that's a lot of money difference. Now think about it. You might know some people that purchased homes just 3-4 years ago that have experienced dramatically higher appreciation than that. Again, we're trying to take a conservative analysis to this, and we're also crossing our fingers that we don't have another pandemic to deal with. In addition to the value of the house increasing, every single month that you're paying the mortgage payment that I've illustrated here to you today, which is a 30-year fixed, fully amortized loan, you're paying not only interest for that mortgage, but also principal. So every time you're making that big monthly mortgage payment, your loan balance is actually coming down. So over the course of that same 5-year period, in addition to gaining $148,000 of value, you will also have paid off $32,673 off of your original loan balance. So now, instead of owing over $530,000, you're owing just below $501,000. So that's additional money in the bank, as they say. I'm also including a tax benefit of $14,239. And this is just assuming a standard deduction of $29,200 and a 22% tax bracket. We're incorporating that into it as well, because owning a home is one of the greatest taxable advantages that you could possibly have, especially if further tax policy reduces that standard deduction, then homeownership will become even more relevant. Let's take a look at the next slide. So let's look into the future a little bit. In the end of 5 years, your net gain of purchasing a home in this analysis and forecast would be $124,000, you guys. $124,000. Now, renters, what I want to ask you is to, for right now, take a look at any 5-year prior increment of your life. The last 5 years, the 5 years before that, take whatever 5-year slice of your life that you've ever been through and ask yourself the question, have I ever been able to save $124,000 during that time? I would venture to say that the majority of you are going to say, heck no, I haven't. And by the way, for the exceptions and the ones that say you have or you've exceeded that number, please DM me. I would like you to coach me on what your monthly savings plan is in order to achieve that, because that is a staggering number. And with a normal savings plan, it's very, very difficult, if not impossible, to achieve without home ownership. Now, how did we arrive to that number, right? The $124,000. Well, we're taking into consideration the initial closing cost expenditure that you're spending when you buy that home, which is $11,000. We're actually also counting the $60,000 that you're paying more over the course of 5 years to make that mortgage payment than you are to make that rent payment. So essentially paying yourself back for that deficiency. Now, I didn't include a cost to sell because in this analysis, I'm assuming that at the end of 5 years, you want to keep that house, right? But from all of those expenditures, we are adding the appreciation that you gained on that house over the 5 years. We're adding the amortization payoff of your mortgage that you paid off over that 5-year period. And we're also adding the tax benefit over that 5 years as well. And then we're subtracting from all of those gains, all of the expenses that you paid out of pocket, And we're coming up with a net gain to you of $124,000, which is a very special number, right? So you could sell now, and after paying some expenses to sell that home, can walk away with a huge chunk of money, or take a look at how this curve continues to rise, right? Because as the longer you own a home on a fully amortized loan, more of that mortgage payment every single month is going to start being applied towards principal, which expedites how quickly you're paying the mortgage off versus just paying interest. In addition to that, you're starting to realize that appreciation on the home based on higher values that it achieves every single month. So take a look at that. In month 6, following the same analysis we were on, you'd be in the black by $164,500. In year 7, $209,500. By the end of year 8, you guys, we are well over the $250,000 at $259,631. That is a monstrous number of net gain of wealth in less than a decade. Less than a decade, you are putting $250,000 in the bank, folks. So is it truly more expensive to own than to rent? I don't think so. I think if you're looking through a tunnel and you're only comparing what you're paying off, writing a check for on the first of a month versus what you're paying on the first of a month, renting versus owning, it's easy to come to that analysis. But it's an unfair analysis, because at the end of that 5-year period of renting, you own nothing. You are simply faced with the option again of renewing at a higher monthly rent, or moving to another area and paying more for a home because your family potentially grew in size. Right? You guys, it is a absolutely no-brainer that home ownership is the gateway to legacy, wealth, and retirement. If you're looking for a way to pay your young kids' student loan payments, or pay for college for them, or help them start a business, or how you're going to retire in your golden years, right? This is the way that most Americans achieve that. It's through the vehicle of homeownership. Let's take a look at the next slide. All right, so if you as a first-time home buyer out there, or as a renter who is looking to re-engage back into home ownership, but you're a little bit convoluted because maybe you're not looking to buy a $550,000 house. Maybe you're looking to buy a cheaper one. Maybe you're not looking to spend $3,200 in rent. Maybe that number is closer to $2,300 or $2,400. So you don't know how these numbers pertain to you. Please soon send me a message. I'll put my contact information up at the end of the presentation. You can also reach out to me via any social media platform. There is always no cost or obligation, and I have really cool tech that allows me to prepare this presentation that I gave you here today in this nice little encapsulated flyer that we can operate on your terms. We can look at appreciation rates where you're looking to buy. We can look at rent increases where you're looking to rent. We can look at purchase prices that you might consider buying, and we can look at rent payments that you would otherwise have to pay, very specific to your area, and we can calculate these numbers for you, because at the end of the day, that's all that really matters, right? Let's look at the next slide. So here's my contact information, you guys. The Elevate Group, priding ourselves for 21 years on the education and empowerment of buyers as they progress into home ownership. We cover all aspects of real estate services, and we have a tribe like you would not believe. Phone number's there. That's my direct cell phone number. Feel free to text me, call me, leave me a message, shoot me an email, or reach out on any of my social media channels. You guys, thank you so much for participating. If you are down with this type of information and you want to hear more, please make sure you subscribe to us on social media. We have a commitment in 2024 to really help buyers and prospective homeowners and sellers weed through the very convoluted real estate market. It has been the wild, wild west over the last couple of years, and it's been exasperated by a lot of people getting on social media platforms or real estate practitioners that are saying things without really knowing why they're saying that. Right, so we try to do the opposite. We say things and we back it up with analysis so that you can take that home empowered in the driver's seat, have conversations with the people that matter most to you in this world, and come up with good decisions on what's right for you and your family. Thank you all so much for this time today. Thank you for joining us. I'm sorry about the technology difficulty. If you were on the first one, hopefully you had a chance to check out this one as well. But thank you guys so much. Please follow us. I look forward to talking to you guys soon. Bye-bye.